The diplomatic ship Starwind moved through deep space, carrying representatives from dozens of alien species. Among them were the Velkari, a race that looked like wolves walking on two legs. They were tall, covered in thick fur, and had sharp teeth that showed when they talked. The Velkari were proud warriors who valued strength above all else. Commander Varshan stood in the main conference room, her gray fur perfectly groomed, her uniform decorated with medals from countless battles. She was waiting to meet the human representative. Her people had heard stories about humans, this new species that had just started traveling among the stars. Some said humans were clever. Others said they were dangerous. Varshan wanted to see for herself. The door opened and Lieutenant Jake Morrison walked in. He was young, maybe in his late 20s, with brown hair and an easy smile. He wore a simple blue uniform with no weapons and no armor. He carried only a datapad. The Velkari in the room looked at each other with confusion. Where were his guards? Where were his symbols of rank and power? Jake extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Varshan hesitated, then clasped it briefly. His grip was firm but not challenging. He sat down across from her without any ceremony. The meeting began with questions. The Velkari wanted to know about human military strength, about their territories, about how they organized their packs. Jake answered each question patiently. He talked about cooperation between nations, about peacekeeping forces, about how humans tried to solve problems through talking before fighting. One of the older Velkari, a scarred male named Heston, snorted with contempt. "What about the weak?" he asked. "How do you deal with those who cannot fight? Who cannot contribute to the pack?" Jake smiled, which confused them. "We help them," he said simply. "We have hospitals for the sick, schools for children, homes for the elderly. We believe everyone has value, even if they can't fight." The Velkari shifted uncomfortably. This made no sense to them. In their culture, the strong protected the pack and the weak served the strong. That was the natural order. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared through the ship. An accident in the cargo bay. The Velkari jumped to their feet and ran toward the emergency. Jake followed close behind. When they reached the cargo bay, they found chaos. Heavy containers had shifted during a minor engine malfunction. A support beam had collapsed, and underneath the twisted metal they could hear crying. High-pitched, terrified crying. 3 Velkari cubs were trapped in there. The adult Velkari immediately started pulling at the debris, but their large size and great strength worked against them. Every time they pulled a piece away, more rubble shifted dangerously. The cubs' cries became more frantic. Jake stepped forward. "Let me try," he said, Heston growled. "This is not your concern, human." "Those are children in there," Jake replied quietly. "It's everyone's concern." Varshan studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Let him through." Jake dropped to his knees and examined the collapsed structure. He was smaller than the Velkari, which meant he could fit into spaces they couldn't reach. He grabbed a light and a small toolkit from an emergency locker. Then, despite the protests of the adult Velkari, he crawled into the narrow gap between fallen beams. Inside the wreckage, it was dark and cramped. Jake could barely move. He followed the sound of crying until his light found them. 3 small Velkari cubs huddled together. The oldest was maybe 5 years old in human terms. The middle one had a cut on her leg. The smallest, barely more than a baby, was shivering with fear and shock. "Hey there," Jake said softly. "My name is Jake. I'm here to help you out of this mess." The cubs stared at him with wide, golden eyes. They had never seen a human before, but something in his voice made them quiet down a little. "I know you're scared," Jake continued, working carefully to secure a loose beam above them, "but you're going to be okay. I promise." He took off his uniform jacket and wrapped it around the smallest cub, who was shaking badly. The little one clutched the jacket and pressed closer to Jake. It took 20 careful minutes. Jake stabilized the debris piece by piece, talking to the cubs the whole time. He told them about Earth, about his little sister, about anything he could think of to keep them calm. When he finally created a safe path out, he carried each cub through the narrow space one at a time. The oldest went first. She was brave but limping. Jake handed her to her mother, who grabbed her with a cry of relief. The middle cub followed, crying but unharmed except for the cut. Finally, Jake emerged with the smallest one still wrapped in his jacket, clutching his shirt with tiny clawed hands. The medical team rushed forward. Jake had scrapes all over his arms and a nasty bruise forming on his shoulder where a beam had clipped him, but he waved off the medics. "Check the cubs first," he said. Make sure they're all right. The Valkyrie medical staff took the 3 cubs to the medical bay. Jake followed, limping slightly. The adult Valkyrie watched him go, saying nothing. But something had shifted in how they looked at the human. In the medical bay, the cubs received treatment for their injuries. The cuts were cleaned and bandaged. The smallest cub, whose name was Fenn, had a mild concussion but would recover. The middle cub was Toss, and the oldest was Kira. Their parents stood nearby, grateful but strangely quiet. The medical staff tried to get the cubs to drink some water and eat a nutrient bar. But the cubs refused. They whimpered and turned their heads away. The doctors were puzzled. The cubs needed to eat to recover their strength. Then Jake walked over. He sat down beside the medical bed where little Fenn lay. "Hey, buddy," he said gently. "You need to drink something. You'll feel better." He held out a cup of water. Fenn looked at him with those big golden eyes and took the cup with both small paws. He drank. When Jake offered a piece of the nutrient bar, Fenn ate it. The same thing happened with Toss and Kira. They wouldn't take food from the doctors or even from their parents. But when Jake offered it, they ate. Commander Varshan watched this from the doorway. Her expression was troubled. In all her years, she had never seen Valkyrie cubs reject their own parents in favor of an outsider. It went against everything she knew about pack behavior. The cubs' parents tried again to feed their children. The cubs turned away. But when Jake sat with them and talked to them in his soft voice, they ate everything offered. This was going to be a problem. 3 days passed, and the situation got worse instead of better. The cubs, Kira, Toss, and little Fenn, refused to eat unless Jake was in the room. They whimpered when he left. They perked up only when they heard his voice. The Valkyrie medical staff tried everything, but nothing worked. Commander Varshan called a private meeting with her senior officers. They gathered in a secure conference room away from the humans. The mood was dark. "This is unacceptable," Heston said, his claws scraping against the table. "Cubs should bond with their pack, with their parents, not with some alien stranger." Another officer, a female named Dana, nodded in agreement. There must be something wrong with them. Perhaps the accident damaged their minds. Varshan shook her head. "The doctors say they are physically fine. Their minds are sharp. They simply will not eat for anyone except the human. Then he has done something to them," Heston insisted. "Some kind of mind control. Some chemical or technology we do not understand." The room erupted in discussion. Some agreed with Heston. Others thought the idea was foolish. But no one had a better explanation. Why would healthy Valkyrie cubs act this way? Varshan raised her hand for silence. "I will speak with Morrison directly. We need answers." Meanwhile, Jake was unaware of the growing tension his presence caused. He visited the medical bay during his breaks, bringing the cubs small treats from the ship's kitchen. He had learned that they liked sweet fruits, so he brought sliced apples and pears. He sat with them and told them stories about Earth. "On my planet," he said, sitting cross-legged on the floor while the 3 cubs gathered around him, "we have animals that look a little bit like you. We call them wolves. They live in packs and hunt together. People used to be afraid of them, but now we protect them." Kira, the oldest, tilted her head. "Why protect them if they are dangerous?" Jake smiled. "Because they're important. Every creature has a place in the world. And besides, they're beautiful. Just like you 3. Little Fenn crawled into Jake's lap and curled up there. Jake gently scratched behind the cub's ears, and Fenn made a happy sound deep in his throat. The cub's parents watched from across the room, their expressions unreadable. That evening, Commander Varshan found Jake in the ship's observation deck. He was looking out at the stars, drinking coffee from a metal cup. "Lieutenant Morrison," she said formally, "we need to talk." Jake turned and smiled. "Sure, Commander. What's on your mind?" Varshan's golden eyes studied him carefully. "What have you done to the cubs?" The smile faded from Jake's face. "I'm sorry, what?" "The cubs will not eat for their parents. They will not eat for our doctors. They eat only when you are present. This is not natural behavior for Valkyrie young. So I ask again, what have you done to them?" Jake looked genuinely confused. "I haven't done anything to them. I just spent time with them. They were scared after the accident, so I tried to make them feel safe." "How?" Varshan demanded. "How do you make them feel safe?" Jake thought about it. "I talk to them. I listen when they're upset. I bring them food and sit with them while they eat. I tell them stories. Same things you do with any scared kid. We do not do those things, Varshan said. Cubs learn strength from their pack. They learn discipline and courage. They do not need stories and gentle words, really? Jake asked. Because from what I've seen, Kira, Toss, and Fen needed exactly that. They were hurt and terrified. Being strong wasn't going to help them in that moment. They needed to feel safe first. Varshan's tail lashed behind her in frustration. You speak as if safety comes from softness. Safety comes from strength, from the pack's power to protect its members. Maybe, Jake said quietly, but strength doesn't mean much to a scared 5-year-old trapped under debris. They needed someone to tell them it would be okay. They needed comfort. The word hung in the air between them. Comfort. The Velkari language had a word for it, but it was rarely used. It implied weakness, a need for reassurance that a strong warrior should not require. Varshan sat down heavily. The cubs' parents are ashamed. Their own children turn away from them and toward you. It brings dishonor to their family. Jake's expression softened. I didn't mean for that to happen. Look, maybe I can help. I could show the parents what I do. They could do it with me. You would do this? Varshan asked, surprised. Of course. I don't want to come between cubs and their parents. I just want the kids to be okay. The next day, Jake arrived at the medical bay with Kira's father, a large male named Carl. The big Velkari looked uncomfortable, his ears flat against his head. But he had agreed to try the humans' method. Jake sat down next to Kira. Hey, kiddo. Your dad's here. He wants to have breakfast with us. Kira looked at her father nervously. Carl stood stiffly, unsure what to do. Jake patted the floor next to him. Come on, sit down. It's easier to talk when you're at their level. Carl slowly lowered himself to the floor. It felt undignified, sitting on the ground like a cub. But he did it. Jake handed Kira a piece of fruit. She took it and ate. Then Jake handed a piece to Carl. Now you try. Offer her some food and say something nice. Carl held out the fruit awkwardly. Eat, he commanded. Kira's ears went back. She didn't take the food. Jake shook his head gently. Not like that. Don't command, offer, and maybe tell her something, like how proud you are that she was brave during the accident. Carl's jaw worked. These words did not come easily to him. But he tried. Kira, he said, his voice rough. You were brave when the medal fell. I am proud. Please eat. Kira looked surprised. Her father never said things like this. Slowly, she took the fruit from his hand and ate it. Something in Carl's chest loosened. He looked at Jake, who nodded encouragingly. Over the next hour, Jake taught Carl how to speak gently, how to praise small things, how to simply be present without demanding strength. It felt strange to the Velkari father, but he could not argue with the results. Kira laughed when he tried to peel a fruit and fumbled it. She showed him her bandages and explained what the doctor had said. She talked to him more than she had in months. The same process repeated with Toss's mother, a warrior named Beth, and with Fen's parents, who were younger and less set in their ways. Each time, Jake showed them how to connect with their cubs through gentleness instead of authority. Word spread among the Velkari on the ship. Some mocked the parents for lowering themselves to sit on the floor and speak softly like the human. Others were curious. A few came to watch through the medical bay windows. They saw their fierce warriors doing something they had never done before. Playing, laughing with their cubs, speaking words of comfort and encouragement. It looked weak to some, but they could not deny what they saw. The cubs were thriving. They were eating, playing, recovering quickly from their injuries. Commander Varshan watched it all. She began to research human culture more deeply. What she found amazed her. Humans did not just care for their own young. They adopted children who were not related to them. They rescued animals. They built hospitals and schools for those who could not afford them. They helped strangers for no apparent gain. This was not weakness, she slowly realized. This was a different kind of strength entirely. A strength her people had never considered. The strength to care for others even when it brought no immediate advantage. The strength to be gentle in a harsh universe, but not everyone agreed. Heston and several other traditionalists believed the human was corrupting their cubs, making them soft. They demanded Jake be removed from the cubs immediately. Varshan faced a difficult choice. Keep the human away to satisfy the traditionalists, or allow him to stay and risk dividing her crew. Commander Varshan made her decision. Despite the protests from Heston and the traditionalists, Jake would be allowed to continue working with the cubs. But there was a condition. He had to teach any Velkari parent who wanted to learn his methods. He agreed immediately. What started as 3 families quickly grew. Other Velkari parents on the ship began to notice the changes in Kira, Toss, and Fen. The cubs were happy. They talked more. They played games. They still respected their parents, but now there was something new in the relationship. Something the Velkari did not have a word for. Trust mixed with joy. One evening, a group of 5 Velkari parents approached Jake in the common area. They were younger warriors, less rigid in their thinking. A female named Kate spoke for the group. "We have cubs back on our home world," she said, her voice uncertain. "We want to learn what you teach, but we do not understand why it works." Jake set down the book he was reading. "What do you mean?" A male named Peter stepped forward. "In our culture, cubs learn through discipline, through seeing strength. We show them how to fight, how to survive. But you show them softness. How does this make them stronger?" Jake thought carefully about his answer. "It doesn't make them stronger physically, but it makes them stronger here." He tapped his chest. "Inside, when kids feel safe and loved, they're willing to take risks. They explore. They learn. They're not afraid to fail because they know someone will help them up." "But what about when we are not there?" another parent asked. "What about when they face danger alone?" "That's the thing," Jake said. "Kids who grow up feeling secure become more confident adults. They know their own worth. They're not constantly trying to prove themselves through aggression. They can be strong when they need to be, but they can also ask for help when they need that." The Velkari looked at each other. This idea was difficult to grasp. In their world, asking for help was admitting weakness. Jake could see their confusion. "Let me show you something," he said. He pulled out his datapad and called up a video from Earth. It showed human children in a school, learning and playing. Then it showed the same humans as adults working together on a construction project. "See how they cooperate?" Jake pointed. They learned that as children. They learned that working together and helping each other makes everyone stronger. Not just the strongest individual, but the whole group. Kate's ears perked up. "The whole pack becomes stronger?" "Exactly," Jake said. That concept they could understand. Pack strength was everything to the Velkari. If this human method could make the entire pack stronger, then perhaps it was worth exploring. Over the following weeks, Jake held informal teaching sessions. He showed Velkari parents how to play simple games with their cubs. How to praise effort instead of just success. How to comfort a child who was upset instead of telling them to be strong. It was awkward at first. The Velkari were not used to being gentle, but they practiced. Carl brought his daughter Kira to one session and demonstrated what he had learned. Other parents watched, fascinated as Kira climbed on her father playfully, something no Velkari cub would normally dare to do. "She is not afraid of you," Heston observed from the doorway. He had come to criticize but found himself watching instead. "No," Carl agreed. "She is not afraid, but she still respects me. It is different now. Better." Heston grunted and left, but he looked troubled. Meanwhile, Commander Varshan continued her research into human culture. She studied Earth's history and was shocked by what she found. Humans had survived terrible wars, disasters, and conflicts, but what allowed them to rebuild was not their weapons or their strength. It was their ability to care for each other, to form communities based on mutual support. She found records of humans adopting orphaned animals from other species. She read about a human who had saved a bird with a broken wing and nursed it back to health, even though the bird could provide nothing in return. She discovered organizations dedicated entirely to helping those who could not help themselves. This was unprecedented in galactic society. Most species helped their own kind because it benefited the group, but humans extended this care beyond their species, sometimes to creatures that would never be able to repay them. It made no logical sense, yet somehow human civilization thrived because of it. Varshan realized something profound. Humans had weaponized compassion, not in a manipulative way, but as a genuine force. When they helped others, those others became loyal allies. When they showed kindness, they created bonds that were stronger than any treaty. When they nurtured the weak, those weak grew strong and remembered who had helped them. This was a kind of power the Velkari had never considered. She shared her findings with her senior staff. The reactions were mixed. Some, like Heston, remained skeptical. Others were intrigued. A few were worried that adopting human methods would make the Velkari soft, vulnerable to their enemies. "Look at human military history," Varshan said. displaying images on the screen. They are not soft. They fight fiercely when threatened, but they also know when not to fight. They understand that the strongest victory is one where no one has to die. She showed them images of human peacekeepers, of negotiators, of aid workers in disaster zones. They do not see helping others as weakness. They see it as duty. And because of this, they have allies everywhere. Who would not follow someone who had saved their life, healed their child, or fed them when they were starving? The room fell silent. It was a tactical advantage they had never thought about. One officer, a thoughtful male named Greg, spoke up. If we adopt these methods, we would need to change everything. Our entire society is built on hierarchy and strength. Not change everything, Varshan corrected. Adapt, add to what we have. We can still be strong warriors. But we can also be the ones who protect the weak, rather than dominate them. Imagine a Valkyrie fleet that other species actually want to work with instead of fear. That night, Jake received an unexpected visitor. Heston came to his quarters. The old warrior looked uncomfortable, his tail held low. I owe you an apology, human, Heston said stiffly. I thought you were making our cubs weak. I was wrong. Jake gestured for him to sit. What changed your mind? Heston's claws flexed. I watched Carl with his daughter. I have known Carl since we were both young. He was always a fierce warrior, but a distant father. His cubs feared him. Now his daughter climbs on him like he is a piece of furniture. She laughs with him. And I realize something. She will grow up without fear. When she faces danger, she will not freeze. She will act. Because you taught her that she is worth protecting. Jake nodded slowly. That's the idea. I have cubs of my own, Heston continued. On the home world, I have not seen them in 2 years. When I return, I want to try your methods. Will you teach me? Of course, Jake said. It would be my honor. Word of Heston's change of heart spread quickly. If the most traditional warrior on the ship could accept human methods, then anyone could. More Valkyrie came to Jake's sessions. They asked questions. They practiced. They made mistakes and laughed at themselves, which was something they had never done before. The cubs on the ship became happier. They played in the corridors under watchful but no longer stern eyes. They asked questions without fear of punishment for ignorance. They showed affection to their parents openly. And slowly the adult Valkyrie began to change too. They smiled more. They helped each other with daily tasks instead of seeing every interaction as a test of dominance. They discovered that life was better when you did not have to prove your strength every moment of every day. Commander Varshan compiled all of this into a report for the Galactic Alliance. It was the most unusual evaluation report ever submitted. She recommended humans for full membership in the Alliance, not because of their military might or their technology, but because of their capacity for compassion. Humans possess a power we have not seen before, she wrote. The power to transform those around them, to make the weak strong, to turn enemies into friends, to build communities based on care rather than fear. This is the kind of species the galaxy needs. The report was sent. Now they would wait for the Alliance's response. But regardless of what the politicians decided, the Valkyrie on the Starwind had already made their choice. They had learned a new way, and they would never go back. The Starwind was 2 weeks from its next destination when the emergency call came through. A small frontier colony was under attack by pirates. The colony housed multiple species, including several Valkyrie families who had settled there to start farms and trading posts. Commander Varshan's response was immediate. She changed course and mobilized her warriors. The ship's engines pushed to maximum speed. Every combat-ready crew member prepared for battle. Jake found Varshan in the command center, studying tactical displays of the colony. I want to help, he said. She looked at him with surprise. You are a diplomat, not a soldier. I was a soldier before I was a diplomat, Jake replied. Marine Corps, Earth Defense Force, I've seen combat. And right now you need every person who can fight. Varshan studied him for a long moment. She had learned to trust this human's judgment. Very well. You will join the assault team, but you follow my orders without question. Yes, ma'am, Jake said. The Starwind arrived at the colony to find chaos. 3 pirate ships orbited the planet, their crews having already landed and taken control of the main settlement. Long-range scans showed that the pirates had herded most of the colonists into the central community building and were holding them hostage. The pirates sent a message. They wanted supplies, fuel, and safe passage. If the Starwind tried to interfere, they would start killing hostages. They gave Varshan 2 hours to decide. The Velkari warriors growled with rage. Their instinct was to attack immediately, to overwhelm the pirates with superior force. But Varshan raised her hand for silence. "If we charge in, hostages will die," she said. "We need a better plan." Jake stepped forward. "Let me look at the colony layout." He studied the scans carefully. The community building has a ventilation system that connects to the underground water treatment facility. It's a tight fit, but a small team could use it to get inside without being detected. Heston shook his head. "We are too large to fit through ventilation tunnels." "Most of you are," Jake agreed. "But I'm not. And if I take 1 or 2 of your smaller warriors, we could infiltrate while your main force creates a distraction." Varshan considered this. It went against Velkari tactics, which favored direct confrontation. But she had learned that human methods sometimes worked better. "Explain your plan fully." Jake outlined his strategy. The main Velkari force would land openly at the colony's spaceport, demanding to negotiate. This would draw the pirates' attention. Meanwhile, Jake and a small team would enter through the underground system, locate the hostages, and prepare to neutralize the guards from inside. When the moment was right, both teams would strike simultaneously. It was risky. It required precise timing and coordination. But it minimized danger to the hostages. Carl volunteered immediately to go with Jake. "I have learned much from you, human. Let me put those lessons to use." Another warrior, a lean female named Lisa, also stepped forward. She was smaller than most Velkari, which had always made her feel inadequate. Now her size was an advantage. The 3 of them prepared quickly. They wore light armor and carried weapons designed for close quarters. Jake also packed a small medical kit and something else, something the Velkari thought was strange. A children's toy, a small stuffed animal from Earth that looked like a bear. "Why do you bring that?" Lisa asked. "Trust me," Jake said. "If there are kids in there, this might help." They launched in a small shuttle, flying low to avoid detection. They landed a mile from the colony and moved on foot, using the rough terrain for cover. The entrance to the water treatment facility was hidden in a rocky hillside, sealed with a simple lock that Jake bypassed easily. Inside, the tunnels were dark and cramped. Even Jake had to crawl in some places. Carl and Lisa, larger and bulkier, struggled more, but they pressed on, following Jake's lead. Through their communication devices, they heard Varshan's team land at the spaceport. They heard her demand to speak with the pirate leader. The distraction was working. Jake's team reached the ventilation shaft that led into the community building. Through the metal grates, they could see the main room. About 60 colonists were crowded together, guarded by 8 pirates with weapons. Among the hostages, Jake spotted several children, including 2 small Velkari cubs who looked terrified. "There are too many guards," Carl whispered. "We need to thin their numbers," Jake nodded. He studied the room layout, noting the positions of the guards, the exits, and the hostages. Then he noticed something important. The pirates were nervous. They kept glancing toward the door, worried about the Velkari force outside. They were not paying close attention to the hostages. "We need to separate the guards from the hostages," Jake said quietly. "Get them to move away from the group. Then we strike." "How?" Lisa asked. Jake smiled. "I'm going to give them something to worry about." Before the others could stop him, Jake opened the ventilation grate and dropped down into the room. He landed in a crouch, hands visible and empty, appearing unarmed. The pirate spun toward him in surprise. "Who are you?" One demanded, raising his weapon. "I'm nobody important," Jake said calmly, his voice carrying across the room. "Just someone who got lost in the tunnels. Don't shoot." The hostages, who had been silent and terrified, now stared at Jake. The 2 Velkari cubs recognized him. Despite their fear, their ears perked up. The pirate leader, a large reptilian alien, approached Jake. "You're from the Starwind. How did you get in here?" "Through the maintenance tunnels," Jake said honestly. "Look, I'm not armed. I'm not a threat. I just want to make sure everyone stays calm." While he spoke, Jake moved slowly toward the children. The pirates, focused on this unexpected intruder, didn't notice Carl and Lisa moving into position above them. "Stay back from the hostages," the pirate leader ordered. Jake ignored him and knelt down next to the 2 Velkari cubs. They were shaking with fear. "Hey there," he said softly, pulling out the stuffed bear. "Remember me? We met on the Starwind." The cub's eyes widened. One of them reached for the toy. The act was so innocent, so unexpected in this tense situation, that several of the pirates lowered their weapons slightly, confused by what they were seeing. "It's going to be okay," Jake told the children, his voice calm and gentle. "Just stay very quiet for a minute." That was the signal. Carl and Lisa dropped through the ventilation shaft. They moved with the speed and precision of trained warriors, but also with the controlled discipline that Jake had taught them. They neutralized 3 pirates in seconds. The other guards spun around trying to react. Jake pulled the children down, shielding them with his body. The other hostages dropped to the floor as Jake had hoped they would. Varshan's team breached the main door at the same moment. The pirates, caught between 2 forces and already disoriented, surrendered quickly. The entire operation took less than 3 minutes. Not a single hostage was harmed. In the aftermath, as Varshan's team secured the prisoners and checked the colonists for injuries, something remarkable happened. The rescued children from multiple species clung not just to their own parents but to anyone who offered comfort. The 2 Velkari cubs attached themselves to Carl, who knelt down and spoke to them gently, using the methods Jake had taught him. A small alien child, some kind of reptilian species that Jake didn't recognize, was crying for her mother who had been injured in the initial attack. Jake scooped her up and carried her to the medical team, talking to her softly the whole way. The child's crying quieted. She gripped his shirt with tiny claws, trusting this strange alien who smelled wrong and looked different but felt safe. One of the colonists, a Velkari elder, approached Varshan. "I have never seen anything like that operation," he said. "The human could have attacked the pirates directly. Instead, he comforted children. And that act confused the enemy long enough for your warriors to strike." Varshan watched Jake, who was now sitting on the ground with several children gathered around him, while their parents received medical attention. He was showing them the stuffed bear, making it dance and telling them a story. The children were laughing, the fear already fading from their eyes. He weaponized their compassion against them. The elder continued. The pirates did not expect to see gentleness in a combat situation. It made them hesitate, and that hesitation cost them the fight. Varshan nodded slowly. "Humans understand something we are only beginning to learn. They know that protecting others requires more than strength. It requires wisdom, knowing when to fight and when to comfort, when to show force and when to show care." Heston approached, his armor still smoking from the brief firefight. The human was right, he admitted grudgingly. His plan worked better than a direct assault would have. And look at the children now. They will remember that they were protected, not just rescued. They will grow up knowing that there are people who care about them. That night, as the colonists began the work of rebuilding, Jake sat with Carl and Lisa. They were exhausted, but satisfied. They had saved lives without unnecessary violence. "You taught us something today," Carl said. "You showed us that caring for others is not separate from protecting them." "It is part of it," Jake smiled. "You already knew that. You just needed to see it in action." The message had been sent to the galaxy, though not through official channels. The Velkari warriors, who had once mocked the idea of... The weeks following the rescue operation brought profound changes to the Starwind. The Velkari crew, especially those who had participated in the mission, began to see their entire culture through new eyes. What had started with 3 cubs refusing to eat had transformed into a movement. Commander Varshan received regular reports from the Velkari homeworld. Word of what was happening aboard the Starwind had spread. Parents were curious about these new methods. Some criticized them as weakness, but others, particularly younger families, wanted to learn more. The Galactic Alliance finally responded to Varshan's evaluation report. Their message was cautious but interested. They wanted to observe human methods firsthand before making any final decisions about membership. They were sending representatives to meet with the Starwind crew and, specifically, with Lieutenant Jake Morrison. Jake took the news calmly. "I hope they understand I'm not special," he told Varshan. "I'm just one guy. What I showed you, most humans know instinctively. We're raised to care for each other." "That is precisely what makes humans remarkable," Varshan replied. "You do not see it as remarkable. You see it as normal." The cubs, Kira, Toss, and Little Fen had fully recovered from their injuries. But the bond they had formed with Jake remained strong. They visited him daily, though now they were equally comfortable with their own parents. The change in those families had been dramatic. Carl, Kira's father, had become an advocate for the new methods. He held meetings with other Valkyrie parents, showing them what he had learned. His demonstrations were sometimes clumsy, but they were genuine. Kira would climb on her father's shoulders while he spoke, and other parents would watch in amazement. Before, I thought showing affection made cubs weak, Carl explained to a group. I thought they needed to see only strength. But I was wrong. My daughter is braver now than before. She knows I will always protect her, so she is not afraid to try new things. She knows I will catch her if she falls. Beth Toss's mother shared similar experiences. My cub talks to me now. Really talks. She tells me her fears, her hopes, her ideas. Before, she only answered when spoken to. I thought that was respect. Now I know it was just fear. Even Heston, the old traditionalist, had changed. He spent hours in video calls with his own cubs back on the homeworld. Through the screen, he tried to practice what Jake had taught him. It was awkward and difficult across such distance, but his cubs responded. They asked when he would come home. They told him they missed him. They had never said such things before. The Galactic Alliance representatives arrived 3 weeks later. There were 5 of them, each from a different species. They came with skepticism written all over their faces. They had read Varshan's report, but reports were just words. They wanted proof. Jake met them in the conference room along with Varshan and several other Valkyrie officers. The lead representative, a crystalline being named Quartz, spoke first. We have reviewed your evaluation, Commander Varshan. Your claims about human methods are extraordinary. Some on the Alliance Council believe you have been manipulated or deceived. Varshan's ears flattened against her head, a sign of controlled anger. I assure you my judgment is sound. We shall see, another representative said. We wish to observe these methods ourselves. We wish to see if they produce the results you claim. Jake spoke up. With respect, you're not going to see much in a formal observation. This isn't a performance. It's just people treating each other with kindness. If you want to understand, you need to spend time with us. See how we live day to day. The representatives agreed, though some looked doubtful. Over the next several days, they shadowed the crew. They watched Jake interact with the cubs. They attended Carl's teaching sessions. They observed meals, recreation periods, and daily routines. What they saw challenged everything they thought they knew about strength and hierarchy. They saw Valkyrie warriors playing games with children. They saw officers admitting mistakes without shame. They saw crew members from different ranks helping each other without concern for status. One representative, a being from a species that valued logic above all else, approached Jake with a question. I do not understand the efficiency of your methods. Time spent comforting others is time not spent on productive tasks. How does your species accomplish anything? Jake thought about how to answer. It's not about efficiency in the moment. It's about building a foundation. When people feel valued and supported, they work harder. They're more creative. They solve problems better because they're not afraid to suggest ideas, and when crisis comes, they stand together instead of falling apart. But this requires trust, the representative said. Trust is a weakness. It can be betrayed. Yes, it can, Jake agreed. But without trust, you're always alone. Even in a crowd, even in a pack, you're alone. Humans decided a long time ago that the risk of trust was worth it. Because the alternative, never trusting anyone, is too lonely to bear. The representative had no response to that. The turning point came unexpectedly. One of the representatives, an avian species called the Threx, received bad news from home. Her mate had been injured in an accident. She would survive, but she was in pain and asking for her partner. The Threx representative, whose name was Skylar, was visibly distressed but trying to hide it. Jake noticed. He approached her quietly. I heard about your mate. I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do? Skylar's feathers ruffled. There is nothing to be done. I'm too far away to help. I must finish this evaluation first. The evaluation can wait, Jake said gently. You should go home. That would be showing weakness, Skylar protested. My personal concerns should not interfere with my duties. Jake shook his head. That's not weakness. That's being human, or Threx or whatever. When someone you love is hurting, you go to them. That's what love means. Commander Varshan overheard and immediately made arrangements. The Starwind altered course to the nearest transport hub where Skylar could catch a fast ship home. The other representatives protested, saying the evaluation wasn't complete. The evaluation is finished, Varshan declared. You asked what human methods look like. This is it. We put people before procedures. We recognize that duties are important, but so are the people performing those duties. Skylar was overwhelmed. In her culture, personal needs were always secondary to professional obligations. The idea that an entire ship would change course for her personal crisis was unthinkable. She tried to refuse, but Varshan was firm. "Your mate needs you," the Velkari commander said. "Go to her." That is what the human has taught us. That is what makes us stronger. Skylar left with tears in her large eyes. The other representatives were shaken. They had just witnessed something that contradicted their entire understanding of duty and strength. That evening, the remaining representatives gathered in the observation deck with Jake, Varshan, and several crew members. They talked for hours, not as officials conducting an evaluation, but as people trying to understand a new idea. Quartz, the crystalline being, finally spoke. "I think I begin to understand. You are not making warriors soft. You are making them whole. A warrior who knows only fighting is incomplete. A warrior who also knows compassion is complete." Jake smiled. "Something like that. We're all just trying to do our best. And it's easier to do your best when you know someone cares about you." The representatives returned to the Alliance with their report. It was not the report they had expected to write. They recommended humanity for membership, not because humans were powerful or technologically advanced, but because they possessed something rare, the ability to change those around them for the better. The recommendation passed, though not without debate. Humanity was welcomed into the Galactic Alliance with the unusual designation of cultural catalyst species. Meant humans were recognized as having unique value in helping other species grow and adapt. Jake received notification that he was being promoted and reassigned. He would serve as a permanent cultural liaison between humanity and the Velkari. The Starwind would be his home, traveling between worlds and teaching what he had accidentally discovered, that strength and gentleness were not opposites but partners. On his last day before the new assignment officially began, Jake sat with Kira, Toss, and Fen one final time as Lieutenant Morrison. Tomorrow he would be Commander Morrison. But today he was just Jake, their friend. "Are you leaving?" Little Fen asked worriedly. "No," Jake assured him. "I'm staying right here on the Starwind. I'll see you every day." "Good," Kira said firmly. "You still need to finish the story about the bears." Jake laughed. "I promise I'll finish it." Toss, always the thoughtful one, looked at Jake seriously. "You taught our parents to be different. You taught all of us to be different. Why?" Jake considered the question carefully. "Because I believe everyone deserves to be loved and cared for. Not because they're strong or useful or powerful. Just because they exist. Every person, every cub, every being in the universe has value. And when we treat each other that way, amazing things happen." The cubs thought about this. Then Fen crawled into Jake's lap, just like he had that first day in the medical bay. "Thank you for feeding us," he said quietly. Jake hugged the small cub gently. "You're welcome, buddy." But they both knew Fen wasn't just talking about food. He was talking about being fed kindness, attention, love,